Hello Horror Hounds, welcome to my horror house. I have just returned from watching The Nun II and thought I would share my initial thoughts and reactions with you. I was expecting to have to go in and hate watch this film because, as regular viewers might know, recently I went back through the Conjuring franchise and found it to be of varying quality. One of the duffers in it was The Nun. And The Nun II is directed by Michael Chavez, who previously in the Conjuring world has directed The Curse of La Llorona, which is another dud, and The Conjuring 3, The Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It, which was a little workmanlike. So colour me surprised to be able to report that I had a lot of fun with The Nun II, more fun than I was expecting to have. It doesn't reinvent the wheel. And as with an awful lot of the non-James Wan Conjuring movies, it does miss James Wan's ability to really craft a tense scene and build up tension and release it. He's an absolute expert at that. I would say the only non-James Wan movie in the Conjuring franchise that sort of comes close to that is absolutely Annabelle Creation, one of the high spots for me of the Conjuring franchise. So in The Nun II, we follow once again Taissa Farmiga is playing Sister Irene, and she is called upon to investigate a series of murders and seeming suicides of priests and nuns who all die in ways that should be familiar to anyone who studied the happenings in the Romanian convent in the first film, The Nun. And the belief is that the demon is back and is moving westward looking for something. I'm quite pleased that the film really cuts to the chase relatively quickly. Anyone who's familiar with The Nun and sort of slightly deeper Conjuring lore, so to speak, knows that Maurice, aka Frenchie, the guide from the first film who helped her out, who saved her life in the first film, is now possessed by the demon Valak, who takes on the form of the Nun. And they don't play cute with that. That is actually the case. The Nun is using Maurice to travel around to try and find a MacGuffin-y thing. It doesn't matter what, I won't spoil it. Irene's investigation and Maurice's life as it is now in a boarding school for girls, which was once a monastery, are set on a collision course with the nun demon Valak. The Nun II doesn't reinvent the wheel. As I say, the moments that are designed to build tension really lack James Wan's sort of sophisticated touch. The Nun can and does often just sort of appear there or behind people and stuff like that. So there's no real tension, there's no real jumps. But what there is quite a lovely gothic sensibility. Better, I would say, even than the first movie. I know a lot of people really loved The Nun for its sort of old school gothic, Romanian, cobwebby, dark, set in a nunnery vibes. I think, to my tastes, that was maybe a slightly Disneyfied or Tim Burtonified version of gothic. Whereas here, we have the old buildings, we have sort of cobbled streets, alleyways, dark basements, high towers, sort of dilapidated chapels, all covered in glorious shadows and shafts of light and dust and sheets and the like, and people wandering around at night with torches, doors creaking, windows rattling, and just absolute bread and butter of the gothic sensibility that, if it's done well, if it looks nice, I will num it up, even if the story isn't the sharpest, even if the horror isn't the creepiest. And one thing I don't think you could possibly disagree with me about, even if you hate the movie or absolutely love the movie and think it's the best thing in the world, it looks absolutely gorgeous. Whoever the director of photography is on this movie earned their pay packet. At night, everything looks exactly as I've described. There are scenes set during the day, quite often in these twisty-turny, cobbly streets in Europe where Sister Irene has gone to investigate that. If they're not real locations, if they're CG locations, then the CG is absolutely superb. One of the little details I adored about this film is that even set during the day, it's clearly, it's a bright sort of autumnal type of light, but the light that's clearly there never quite reaches down to the street level. The buildings are always blocking it off. Everyone is always moving around in shadows. You can't quite reach the light, which is exactly as it should be in a story like this. And whilst, yes, it's a little bit ho-hum more of the same, it seems to be having slightly more fun with it, because there's the possession angle with Maurice. They seem to be able to maneuver and do slightly more things, possibly also because it's not just locked in one location of this Romanian nunnery. It just seemed a little bit freer to do some more stuff. As I say, nothing absolutely groundbreaking, but that slight sense of looseness and freedom sort of equated to much more enjoyment of the movie on my behalf. So whilst The Nun itself is never actually really scary, there are some fantastic little tricks that they pull to try and bring it into our plane. Never as good as the stuff that they did with Ed Warren's painting in The Conjuring II, where the painting goes into the shadows and then the eyes start glowing and then the nun comes out of it. That stuff was absolutely superb. But there's a little sequence with a magazine rack which I think was pretty neat and quite inventive. And the culmination of the film, the ending of it, they just go a bit batshit, which I really appreciated. I think the film really needed that. It doesn't go quite as mad, maybe, as something like The Pope's Exorcist, but I'll be honest with you, mad enough and with enough religious iconography to it to really entertain someone like me who does really dig horror that mucks around in the mud bath of religious iconography. There is even, I was sitting wondering, are we going to reveal why they've cast Taissa Farmiga as Sister Irene? Vera Farmiga's sister, who plays Lorraine Warren, and they look very, very identical to one another. It was a bit of head-scratching casting all the way through the first movie, The Nun, that never gets resolved. And on the way back from the cinema today, I was a little bit disappointed because I thought, they haven't bothered resolving it again. And during this movie, I'm thinking sometimes about the time frame, and this means that Lorraine Warren is alive now and more or less an adult as well, probably, and so they can't be directly related in the like. But the more I think about it, there is a revelation at the end of this film which does explain their physical similarities. It does explain their shared ability of having visions and the like, the psychic aspect of it, and I think that's probably enough. I think they have joined those dots. I had fun with it, more fun than I was expecting to have, so take from that what you will. This is not a hard recommend, but it's a gorgeous looking film, and if you like religious horror and you want something to while away an afternoon, hell yeah, I would recommend The Nun II over The Nun any day of the week.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
You just had to think about it for a little minute, or at least I did. For some people it'll be blindingly obvious and they'll go, Andrew, it's obvious.